Dear ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our session. It's important to forge the positive momentum, and in this session we have all those people who actually are building that momentum. And I would like to thank and welcome our distinguished speakers, Mr. James Tan, Managing Partner of Quest Ventures, Mr. Alim Hamidov, Managing Partner of Most Ventures, Mr. Daniel Seal, Partner of Whitehill Capital, Mr. Shahboz Rahmanov, CEO of My Ventures. And online we also have Mr. Alexey Girin, Managing Partner of Startup VC, Mr. Dilshod Zufarov, CIO of Uzcard Ventures, and Mr. Max Gurvitz, General Partner of Vitosha Venture Partners. And at this moment, I would like to give a floor to Yornurus Magambetov, CEO of AIFC Authority, for opening remarks. The floor is yours, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Arslan. And I'm very happy. I hope you can hear me. I'm very happy to be here. And I know that this is a continuation of our discussions that we had in Almaty. And in Almaty, we had a big fun. And we are very glad that we were able to organize a special session related to venture capital, the regional venture capital in Central Asia and beyond. Today, as you know, we are having Astana Finance Days. Today was a very busy day. There was a lot of announcements, a lot of big deals announced, privatization. And I wanted to share with you why VC is very important for Astana Financial Center. In the beginning, I think a few years ago, when we were having Astana Finance Days, actually it was offline format, and we have Deputy CEO Kairat Kaliyev here, and we had certain sessions, and AIFC's one of the goals was to attract investments, and we have a $10 billion US dollar KPI, of which 6.5 billion were done. We have 3.5 billion to go, and people were asking, why you care about VC? You spend a lot of effort, you work hard, but then you get like $100,000 deal or $1 million deal. It doesn't really move the needle for the overall KPI. And then we went back, we had a lot of actually discussions inside AIFC management team to think about why do we really need VC. And actually we went back to our mission of AIFC is to make a significant contribution towards sustainable development. So for us, VC is not just about this certain money figure. For us, VC is what we call smart capital. For us, venture capital investors are the ones who actually helping to cultivate new entrepreneurship spirit. The VC funding helps us to identify new startups, new companies, new business models. And we are actually, as you heard today from a lot of speakers, we are trying to really transform the country. We are trying to really, there is different new slogans about new Kazakhstan, new economic model, new business model, new population, new startups, new technology, and etc. And for us, this is one of the ways is to actually help to transform not just AIFC, but the societies around us. And as you know, AIFC from the start was not meant to be just for Kazakhstan. AIFC was, from the start, was meant to be regional. There's different regional dimensions. But in 2020, when we had the AIFC Management Council, it's the highest body of the supervisory body of AIFC. It's led by the president of Kazakhstan. From the start, when he joined Management Council in 2020, when we adopted our strategy 2025, he really stressed that AIFC should be a regional financial center investment hub. So he really pushed us towards not just thinking about Kazakhstan, but also thinking about Central Asia and beyond. And we have been making our first steps. We have a few deals. I'm sure you know about them from the last year. We have also a separate team and the separate advisors who are helping us to promote AIFC in the Central Asian region. You have some of them here. Nazira and Vikran are really helping us to have this Central Asian mindset, a regional mindset, and to actually open up AIFC not just to Kazakhstan, but the entire Central Asian community. And there was different propositions in Almaty. I know that to make AIFC a Central Asian VC hub, and I want to, from the AIFC's point of view, I want to assure that we are ready to do that, but we will need your help and your advice. We will need to receive from you suggestions and recommendations, what else we can do more. And I can assure you from the AIFC side, we are ready to move our part to it. So hopefully we can build a Central Asian VC ecosystem. And as we joke around with Nazira and with Vikran, we say, let's make Central Asia great again. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Janusz Magambeta, for supporting our session. So I hope we can evaluate the Central Asian ecosystem and see from different perspectives and find new opportunities. So in order to understand better what's going on in Central Asia, I would like to ask representatives to provide feedback and give their opinion on the perspective of the Central Asian ecosystem. So, Mr. Alim Hamidov, please, can you describe, since you've been at the forefront of this ecosystem development, and I know that you have an experience over 10 years in being the part of the ecosystem and promoting it. So, how do you see it, the progress? What kind of initiatives have been implemented? Which ones were successful, and which ones needed more additional efforts? So, and can you describe the current VC deal state, and also emphasize on what kind of opportunities we have?
Sure. Let me go with English. Yeah.
No, you can go with Russian.
Other parties will understand also. Yeah. Hello, everyone, and thanks a lot for inviting me. I would love to actually give kind of an overview what I see, since we, as a MOS, I would just give a little bit of context. We as a MOS have been developing the startup ecosystem, I think, for more than 10 years. Actually, we started in 2011 as a just incubator, but today we built our own ecosystem, the private ecosystem, which financial, non-financial supports startups. So we have incubator, accelerator, the venture fund, plus UMA Angels Club. And yeah, this whole idea that we totally understand that we're emerging markets, we're a developing market, there's no secret with that. And even I know that in terms of, if we put it, the question in terms of academics, let's say we're still on the activation stage, and it's really fine. And in order to give a characteristic, I think we have a lot of still potential. I subjectively would say that we have more than 5,000 startups right now in the region. Yes, for sure, they're mostly early stage. Yes, for sure, they will die mostly after 3 or 6 months, and it's totally fine. But I still see there's a trend. It's not a hype, it's a trend, and more tech entrepreneurs starting to do their business, which is also good. We see more stories of tech entrepreneurs who are second, third-time founders, which really shows a lot of signals that the ecosystem emerging. I think the example of Pine Melon, of the startup which was founded by Alexei Lee, he sold Ticketon, he created Aviata, and he also made an exit. Now he is doing the Pine Melon. So it's just one example, but there is more and more cases like that. So it means that we have solid entrepreneurs who can do great business. Also, in terms of the venture ecosystem, I would say we're happy that we also see other two funds, the new funds. Somehow, Quest Ventures has been for some time here. White Hill is a new one. I think it's a good sign also, since it's not all about startups. It's also all about the VC funds who we need to make deals. And for sure, we have some issues with the business angels, let's say. We have a lot of capital, but it's hardly go to the venture. But still, yeah, we also try to kind of fix it. But in general, I usually say we have talents, we have capital, we have deals, and it's good that we have this panel since we can highlight this, not just for the local community, but for the international one also.
Thank you. You just touched major points that we're going to be discussing in our session. And I also have a representative from another emerging ecosystem, Dilshod Zufarov. Maybe you can give us insights about Uzbekistan ecosystem. How is this emerging right now?
Yes. Hi, hello everybody. Thank you for inviting me, and happy to be here with you, on online, even if. So, little presentation. Dilshod Zufarov. I'm head of Uzbekistan Venture Capital Association. We work on promotion of venture capital for the economy of the country. So, what can I say about the development of venture capital investment industry in Uzbekistan? What we have a lot of programs of incubation or acceleration programs aimed to growth and to help projects to do MVP or scale. But there is no systematic programs aimed to growth or to develop venture investors, or venture capital funds, or club, or business angels club. It's the first challenge that we see, and the second challenge that we see is regulation about the movement of the capital by the regulation of Republic of Uzbekistan. If the resident of the country want to invest on an international company to the equity, so there is a hard regulation. So we try to find another some solutions to do it, but it's not simple. And we try to work, and it works with Astana International Financial Centers, and thanks to it, we can structure the deals so that we can think about the exit. Because for a venture investor, before entering, we think about the exit. If we structure the deals in Uzbekistan regulation, it's not possible to exit them. So thanks to Astana Financial Centers, it works, but it's not simple. So shortly about maybe some statistics, there are about 800 of startups in the country. So the top 3 are fintech, edtech, and education technologies. There are about 8 VC funds, but for structuring the deal, the challenge that I have mentioned before, they are still active, and so we work with government and other bodies to resolve this challenge. Thank you.
Thank you, Dilshot, for the insights. And next questions I would like to address James and Daniel. Coming from highly competitive and developed ecosystems, I'm sure you have some insights and observations about our local ecosystem. So what we're doing right, what the ecosystem players are doing right, and what's need to be changed or addressed, like any challenge that needs to be addressed from your perspective?
So, hi. Firstly, I think the fact that these conversations are ongoing, showing us that things are going in the right way. And I think, as we said, and as Ali mentioned before, this region is fastly growing. I think we're all seeing globally, certainly in the Middle East, certainly here, a transformation to a knowledge-based economy, which is what startups and technology and innovation is the back. So we have the framework very well placed here, that you have a country and a government driving for more startups, more innovation, the fact that there are more investors being set up, and people like Alim and most who have been building the foundations of an ecosystem. We're at, if you look at all your business study casebook, the hockey stick, this region now is at growth. The fact that more people are wanting to become startups is good. Investors need startups to invest. I often say we're a startup ourselves. As a new fund, our job is to find, I think it's not a mistake, it's an observation I've seen before, not that it's happening here, is sometimes VCs forget that their job is to invest capital into startups. So I've built and sold 3 companies. I sold one to the Singapore government investment fund, and I said that what's always important to remember is investors and startups need to be on the same side. The investor's job is to enable and help grow. And I think that's certainly Whitehill, our approach is very much with the startups, bringing added value. And you need an ecosystem. I mean, we had before just a meeting with most looking at how we can collaborate together, and there's lots of room. So I think the first thing that's doing right, and as an observation, is investors need to work together. The ecosystem is young and small. It's not like investors need to jump on each other. The only observation observation I would say, and this isn't about investors, this is to everyone, is valuations. Many startups now are, a friend of mine once told me, how do you value a startup? He said, you can look at discounted cash flow, modeling, or you can look in the mirror and when you say a number and you laugh, you know you've gone too high. So what's important, and I was at an event here a couple of weeks ago, is startups are all thinking their companies are worth 20 million. People have just thrown numbers out. And I think investors have to be careful. And I think here observation that startups need to be careful. Don't go for too high valuations because you put yourself under pressure. And if you're looking at the market at the moment globally, we're going to see valuations of companies dropping. So my advice to founders is be conservative with your valuations. My advice to investors like ourselves is collaborate, do more deals, work together. And my advice to people is become an entrepreneur, set up a business, be a founder. There's no problem with failing. You start something, you're bound to hit it right. So I think we're in a very good place, but I think we just need to be a bit more conservative with valuations.
Thank you. James, what are your views on that, on our local ecosystem?
Okay, well, very good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Yana, for the welcoming remarks. Thank you, everyone, also for taking the time on the afternoon for joining us. I'm James Tan from Quest Ventures. We are a venture fund based out of Singapore, investing in the region. Ecosystem is in our blood. Ecosystem is in our blood. And when we look at an ecosystem, we look at 5 different pillars, and whether the ecosystem or the country or the city has that 5 important ingredients to build a viable ecosystem. The first is, of course, startups. We've got to have enough startups. And from what we have observed and what Yana has pointed out, the number of startups has grown in the last 10 years, and especially in the last 2 to 3 years. So we are very happy about that. We are also especially happy that at Quest Ventures, our Kazakhstan Digital Accelerator probably contribute 99% of the increase. So that was a very huge increase in the number of startups at the seed stage. The second pillar is Institute of Higher Learning. And here we have the likes of Nazarbayev universities and all the well-known universities and even the high schools and polytechnics that are churning out talent who are important to run startups as a founder, but also important in terms of research and commercialization. So that's IHL, or Institute of Higher Learning. That's the second pillar. The third pillar that we are always interested in, because we are investors ourselves, is what we call risk capital. For risk capital itself, there's a whole value chain to it. There's angel investors, there's a VC fund focused on early stage, VC fund focused on Series C and D and later stage and so on, and PE funds. So risk capital is an important ingredient. We see that in Kazakhstan, we see that in Central Asia in the early stages. The late stage funds, we are not seeing that yet, and we hope that the people who are moving the ecosystem like AIFC and Astana Hub and so on can put in place incentives and objectives to move or to attract late stage venture funds to come to set up shop here in AIFC or in Kazakhstan. That's the third pillar. The fourth pillar is corporates. Corporate innovation or corporate as a purchaser of startups that provide services is important. We are not seeing that much yet, but I think that will certainly grow as startups prove that they are here for the long haul, that their services are indeed can be adopted for commercial users, for corporate users. So that's corporates, that's a fourth pillar. The fifth pillar is government, of which we are all here today because of some agency that's related to the government that invited us here today. And that shows the openness that Kazakhstan has in welcoming, whether you are a venture fund or whether you are IHL, from anywhere around the world to participate in an event like Astana Finance Days. So back to you.
Thank you very much. And I would also like to hear Max. Can you share your views? I know that you are familiar with our ecosystem. You've been to Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan. So maybe you can share your insights. We cannot hear Max.
It's my pleasure. Thank you very much. I've been indeed to most of the countries in the region. I've even been to Kazakhstan, but it's been way too long ago. So I wish I could be in person today, but unfortunately I have to do it by Zoom. So hopefully next time very soon. Myself, my name is Max Gurvitz. I run a venture capital fund based out of Bulgaria. It's a pretty broad seed fund with which we invested about 100 deals. But luck has brought me also to working together with the Central Asian ecosystems, specifically in Uzbekistan, where I'm on the board of advisory of the Uzbek National Venture Capital Fund, UZVC. We're working also with several partners, most notably the USAID's FGI project, with which I'm involved in helping setting up similar instruments in neighboring countries. This year we were quite active in Tajikistan. I hope we'll get to do stuff in Kyrgyzstan and Turkmenistan as well. Look, it's very exciting what's going on in the region, right? As I always like to say, there aren't that many places left in the world where you can actually still not make the mistakes that were made elsewhere in building an ecosystem, a venture ecosystem from the early stages, right? And that's what makes it very exciting to be active in the region. The potential is massive, right? We know about the population numbers in the countries. Digital literacy is very sharply on the rise. The oncoming of digital business opportunities. It's truly one of the very last places in the world where there's so much can be done so quickly with such actually really an educated and talented workforce, right? So this is the reason I think we're all very excited about the region. I think the biggest risks we see right now obviously are political, but if we can somehow steer clear of political instability, I'm personally, as someone who's quite active on the European venture capital scene, I'm very much looking forward to having a very strong partner in Central Asia. And I think that at least as the European venture capital scene, we can get very, we can do many things together with Central Asia as a whole and Kazakhstan in particular.
Thank you, Max. I think Daniel and James touched very important points. The one is that the importance of the ecosystem, and the other one is the role of government. So I think how ecosystem and the government can collaborate and work closely to identify, to impact the rapid development of innovation. So maybe any stimulus instruments can be implemented in terms of policy, infrastructure, and capital. So I would love to hear your thoughts on that. Both, everyone's thoughts. So I think we'll just start discussion. Thanks.
Well, firstly, I think you see certainly in regions where it's successful. I think one of the best case studies of seeing how government and industry works together is Singapore, where, and I often say I believe Kazakhstan is the Singapore of Central Asia. You have a strong forward-thinking government here, strong links with IHL. And if you look in Singapore, one of the drivers was the NUS Enterprise, actually, the main university who started dealing with that. So what's very important when you look, and certainly now if we're bringing it to Kazakhstan, is where government's role is to be an enabler, to allow the right legislation, allow the right, which is why AIFC, why we're here, is such an important aspect, because investor confidence, and certainly from a external international investors coming here, need to know they understand the system. So, AIFC is built as the reputation, common law, all of those things. So that's government's roles. Government role is also to be able to provide. You see where a lot of people have copied, if you look back from Israel, of government investment schemes. So you see here how there's funding, and even if ourselves at White Hill, where we have able to receive World Bank funding linked with government. So the idea of government is to help boost the ecosystem. What's then important is for the ecosystem to move forward. I often say the difference is government is like an oil tanker. Moves very strong, moves very slow for good reasons, but it turns startups and corporate are like speedboats. We can jump very quickly. Both are important. So I think for certainly you're seeing in this region, it's carry on doing what it's doing. The government to lead, the industry to follow, and to enable more frameworks for corporates. Because if you want more international investors coming in here, it's all about what you're doing, raising the profile. You have events like this, Digital Bridge, others, making the framework stronger. You know, AIFC is becoming more and more well known, and then more schemes such as co-investment platform, innovation credits, those things is how you can grow, because both need each other.
Thank you. Alim, maybe you can share your thoughts, as you know, you are very familiar with the ecosystem.
Yeah. You know, I would like to answer maybe in two ways, especially about the government role. There is a stereotype that when the government is in, there's a problem with that. It's sometimes kind of toxic, or they're jumping into what the business should do. But I have an opposite opinion. Like Daniel said, it's all about the environment, the atmosphere, let's say, that the government, only the government can build. So in what the government can do, actually, I think it's from two perspectives. The first one, in general, if we talk about the VC, we should talk about also an IT market in general. Especially we have, and all the startups, all the corporates have showing that there is a deficit, let's say, of IT specialists, starting from junior, senior, and other developers. But this is the basic, right? When we have a lot of, let's say, engineers and IT management, IT finance guys, this are the guys who are going to build the products, right? Who are going to build the startups in the future. So I think that's one of the things that the government should focus on. Actually, I'm happy that the president already announced that there is a program to grow up more than 100,000 developers in 3 years. There's a goal to export more than 500 million USD, and I think the startup can play a big role in that. So I mean, this is about the nurturing in general the IT market. It includes developing and opening more IT schools, entrepreneurship courses, giving an IT visa so more and more startups and talents can come. This is pretty important. So it will be the local competition, not just between us, I mean, between the local teams and startups, but with the international one. I don't know, it can be just basic that our startup can connect to the Stripe, so they can accept international payments. This is the issue, how we can talk about the scale-ups if we cannot even accept the payments, right? So a lot of initiatives with the IT, but with the VC also, I would say there's, I don't want to repeat it a lot, it's about legislation. There is a venture law in Kazakhstan. There is a venture law which was approved, I think, in 2018, but it should be developed for sure. Since we talk to investors and everyone asks, what are the rules? What are the rules, how we can do this? And it's good that we have AIFC, so it has all the instruments and jurisdiction, expat center, everything. But I think the investors are so, sometimes a specific group of people who need sometimes even, you know, the securities or the rules on the government level, on the country level, so which they will be kind of more common to and smoother to go into the field. That's what we feel, I mean, in general. But I really love the concept of how Israel also is doing with this, like maybe Daniel also mentioned a little bit, but about the fund of funds especially as an example, when the government gives the money, like with the White Hill accent, in this case, one-to-one. But the idea is that you're giving the right for the private management company to rule it, and by year, on specific terms, they decrease the equity. So they're not expecting any kind of returns, but it allows to create the series of funds, since we're all investors think like we invested, but who's next, right? Will be the exit and so on. So, I mean, this is pretty crucial that the government should continue this. And yeah, so legislation, providing instruments with the funding of funds, plus I don't know, open a lot of borders through different ways, so more international investors will come. And I would say they all understand there is a huge potential here. And I'm not surprised that every year, at least 3-4 funds are entering the market. So from our perspective, it's a good sign. Sometimes it's kind of tricky that we also the fund, we should compete with them, but this is the market. So in general, I think legislation and creation of the environment for VC in general, this is what I should focus on. I mean, the government should focus on. Thanks.
Yeah, maybe James or Max have any thoughts on that?
So, yeah, so I come from Singapore, and I feel that I don't have to talk about Singapore that much. Most of my panelists have been talking about Singapore quite a fair bit for us. Singapore has the experience of running fund of funds from the government side for the last 20 years. And 1.0 is the first 10 years, 2.0 is where we are right now. And 1.0 was a failure. And 1.0 was a failure because many of the international funds that we attracted to come and set up shop from Silicon Valley, from Europe to set up shop in Singapore all left. They left because the exits were not there. They left because government discontinued whatever policies that attracted them there in the first place. And ultimately, fund managers are there for returns. So if you are employing any policies to attract international funds to come and set up shop here, please have a long horizon to continue to support as long as the funds are generating returns, fulfilling your KPIs and, of course, the fund's KPIs, then I think the government should have the courage and the horizon to continue to support. And looking back and putting on my public sector hat right now in my other role, running an association that looks after the entire ecosystem for Singapore, we would have helped whatever we needed to do to help those funds stay on. But it didn't happen. So 2.0 have changed, and 2.0 have encouraged a lot of funds to set up. They are all fortunately still based in Singapore, and the rules have been tweaked to allow investments not just in Singapore, but also in the rest of the region. And because we all know that Kazakhstan is a huge market, but it's still small when you compare to the rest of the region. And so the government, even though it's taxpayers' money, must be open to the ability for the fund to invest in regional companies. After all, they are anchoring in AIFC or they are anchoring in Kazakhstan, so therefore there is economic value add coming back to Kazakhstan. And if that is happening, then the government should be open to these one-on-one fund, 1+1 fund and so on, investing in the region for the overall good for Kazakhstan.
Thank you, thank you. I think we'll move on to more challenges that startups and VCs face. So, Shahboz, может, вы расскажете, какие трудности?
So can you tell us what kind of complications you encounter when you launch startups? What quality of startups you're looking for? Okay, I'll be speaking Russian. I will make difference. So what is the complexity while looking for startups? No complexities. There are a lot of startups available in the market, but we don't have enough knowledge to construct our own approach within a venture fund. A lot of companies in Central Asian market, in the Kazakh market, but I think this is a temporary phenomenon, do not know how to properly raise funds, attract investments. They do not know how much investments they need for 1 year, how much money they will consume in a month. But that's a temporary shortcoming because the venture investment market is growing voluptuously both in Kazakhstan and Central Asia, and I think we will promptly overcome all those complicated barriers and start operating at the international level. Something like that. Thank you very much. You have touched upon the international level of cooperation. A lot of startuppers orient themselves locally. They operate locally and their ambitions are all local. So what is your strategy? Do we run global immediately, or maybe we can test a certain product at local level, spend time for it, and only then go international? Taking into consideration the present market reality, maybe you should take your time and wait. Well, what we tell to our startups, we tell them not to immediately try to infiltrate the US market. The US market is dense, complicated, You know, a startupper comes to me and says, okay, I'm going for the USA. I tell him, in response, they get millions of people like you. So why don't you trial your model in Kazakhstan first, then in the neighboring countries, then in the region, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, step by step. Eventually you might find your startup successful in Georgia and in other regions. So basically try to conquer the neighbors first, and only then should you think about penetrating more sophisticated, more complicated markets like the one in the United States of America. That's my advice. Thank you very much.
Right on this question about being local startup or going global. For the local startups, what do you see is more prospective markets in terms of like scaling? Should it be like MENA, or should it be like Southeast Asia or USA? Maybe Daniel, James, you can, and Alim, you're also building like a bridge to foreign ecosystems, and you can elaborate on that?
I'm quite vocal on this. I think, as my dear friend said, what's very important is to understand the market. You know, it's so many times companies go into different markets without understanding, you know, and I think certainly for this region, and certainly for any region, a Kazakh entrepreneur will understand a lot more Uzbekistan, Georgia, Azerbaijan, the region, for a few reasons. One, similar language. Two, similar mentality. You know, I've had the fortune of doing business around the world. I'll give an analogy. If you deal with Russians, they're very direct. With Singaporeans, the opposite. So if you're negotiating with the Singaporean, they won't really, you have to read the no. I live now in the UAE. They never say no. You have to understand what the no is. So the mentality of a young founder is he has to understand the market. And what I think is for Kazakh startups to become the leader in the Central Asia region. If you look at Central Asia and you include the neighbors, there's nearly 300 million people. You can get a really good company building. You can expand into Eastern Europe. Ignore the situation that's happening now. Then, if you are a big Western company, who are you going to want to acquire? You're going to want to acquire someone who's the captain of his region. If you're entering America or Europe at the beginning without really understanding, there can be 5, 6 companies doing similar. Also travel, also distance. So my advice, and certainly for what I believe our strategy should be, is let's find Kazakh entrepreneurs who want to be the #1 in Central Asian region. Master Central Asia. You can very quickly then test England, France, Germany, even America. But rush to America, even I say the same, by the way, I'm British originally. I said the same to companies that I've backed in Britain. Don't go rushing to America, you don't understand, because what people with America forget, America isn't one country, it's 50 countries. California is different to New York, is different to that. So, you know, and talking myself as a Brit, America and Britain were 2 different cultures as well. New Yorkers are very different. So I believe, and certainly what I see, there is amazing opportunities in Central Asia. So let's get Kazakh companies to be the #1 in Central Asia, be the #1 expanding in the region, and then from there make a decision whether to go east to Singapore, Southeast Asia, to go west into Europe. And if you look in history, this always has been the Silk Road, the bridge between East and West. And I think if Kazakh companies can become #1 here, they have the skills and the ability to go east and the ability to go west. So that's what I believe it should be. Don't go running too far because you need the foundations.
Thank you. Alim, can you elaborate on that? So you invested mostly in regional startups. What do you think should be next stage for them?
So far we have invested in 6 companies, and I would say that we just started, but I would love to raise it. One of the main criteria that we have, it's about scalability, and especially since we're at the fund of early stage startups, we also discussed it with our partners today during the lunchtime, that when we talk about scalability, it's not about scaling the products, it's scaling the teams. we are full of talents. That's why we actually created the fund here. Since, frankly speaking, when we started to raise the fund, our potential LPs asked us, let's go to the US and just invest in YC startups. And we said, yes, we can, but it will be not top tier 1 startups for sure, since it's a lot of issues. I mean, it's like we're from another region, what kind of value add we can give them, and so on. I mean, a lot of things, but we're here in Central Asia, and we really feel and know the local startups. So in terms of scalability, what we do even with our startups, we look at the team, we look at the product, but scalability is one of them. And especially, I love the words, I would love to cite, to quote Arsen Tomsky, the founder of InDriver, who recently, the big part of the team actually moved to Kazakhstan. He said, and I think his example is really representative for us. He started the business in emerging market, I mean, in Siberia. There's nothing there, but it was ambition, it was the team. So they started as a pilot. They actually tried to scale several times to other regions, even to Kazakhstan. The first time when they entered Almaty, they failed. So they quit it and came back. Now, it's, I think, decacorn already, almost. I mean, it's unicorn for sure. What he said, if you'd love to scale, yes, like my dear friends from the panel also said, you should prepare for it. And with the case of US, let's say, he said you should have a double black belt of making the startup in order to enter the market. It's not so easy. But I'm not saying that we don't need to do this. That's what we're actually saying to our startups. When we invest, we expect, especially since we're the fund, usually the first round they raise is from business angels, let's say. So our money, let's say, our joint venture should go already to scaling. I mean, at least they start to do some custom development stuff, do some traction on international market. It can be like 50-50, local, international, 60-40 or something. But, you know, we truly believe that it will not so hurt us if we fail over there. For sure, we're not heading there. But if we don't do this, it's a big problem, since venture, it's about creating big stories. There is a huge issue that I would love to, that I see a lot of startups here. We should change, we should make shift in our minds to stop, to have this fear, scared to actually move to other markets. We are not worse. That's what we see from other markets. So my thesis, it's scalability is important, and especially if you're in the venture, you should do it global. Just that's it. Yeah.
Thank you. I think we'll just continue on this note. And so we have the community, we have the ecosystem. How do we make that exposure to the global ecosystem? How do we integrate? How do we attract international VCs? Sometimes it's hard to evaluate startup from afar, so you have to be grounded on the spot. But how do we make sure that our startups get exposure to the international VCs? So most of the money deployed are seed money, but eventually we will need Series C money, Series B money. So how do we make sure that we assure the continuity of capital supply and exposure of our startups to the global markets? Please, James. I would also like to hear Max as well on that question.
Well, let me say that let's just go to US and invest in YC. You know, our joke in Southeast Asia, let's just go to Kazakhstan and invest in KDA. Because KDA is an accelerator that we run, and it has been churning out companies. And I just totally agree with my panelists here. I think if they are not ready, not Kazakhstan #1 or not Central Asia #1, it's going to be very difficult for them to prove that they can move to other markets. So I'm in agreement. But sometimes founders, being founders, they say, you know, I've proven it in Kazakhstan, I've proven it in some small corner in somewhere, and I want to go to US. And guess what? They actually do make it. We have one company that proved a little bit in Kazakhstan and then went to Indonesia and now has 70 schools using them. It's a huge number. Very hard to get that kind of numbers and scale within Kazakhstan, much less the region. So founders should know their market best, as David pointed out. So if they know it and they want it, then the purpose of an accelerator program like the one we run, the KDA, will be to help them shape and plan, because failure to plan is planning to fail.
Thanks, Max. Maybe you can also share your viewpoints.
Sure. These are wonderful points that James is making. One of the things that I really believe is that if you want to get VCs to get involved in a new ecosystem, a new one for them, and perhaps one that has just recently come up, it's very important to have the founders actually discover each other, right? One of the things that we always struggle with, and this is true both for here in Eastern Europe, but I'm pretty sure it's true in Central Asia as well, based on my experience, is that we are usually in such places we're pretty good in some things. Very often it's coding, very often it's the exact sciences, the computer sciences, the ability to technically build products. But we tend to be less good, less apt at our soft skills, the ability to sell our products, to design them, to do the business part. And what is really important is to foster startup ecosystems, founder ecosystems where more people connect, right? Some of the best companies you can find here in Europe, at least, are companies that are mixed teams, right? And this is a very wholesome effort, right? It's not just importing or putting out job ads in Europe, let's say, or in the United States, where hey, come to Kazakhstan and become a co-founder. It doesn't work that way. You actually have to. I think it starts with formats like this one, right? Get more people to come, get more people to know the place, to like the place. Set up relatively inexpensive programs. It's something that I've been doing in a few places. Entrepreneurship in residence, right? Just basically get successful exited founders from the US, from Europe, from wherever. Singapore would be a great place with so many people around, and have them come over for a month or 2 months to Kazakhstan, to Uzbekistan, or anywhere in the region. That way you can foment cross-cultural links between mentors and founders. Very often the mentors might become angel investors, might become co-founders in the companies. And that way you will actually get, once, we see this in Europe, for instance, very well with Estonia, right? Estonia is such a place. It's a tiny country, which is outperforming itself massively in terms of venture success, venture funds, 7 unicorns, country of a little more than 1 million people. But one thing that they've done really well, which wasn't easy for a cold northern gray country, really, without a lot of tourism opportunities. But they really managed very well to market themselves to the international community as a fun place to go, meet people, and build some tech. And I think that example, specifically the Estonian example, which we're also trying to replicate in Bulgaria and in many other places in this part of Europe, this is something that we need to do more. And that way, once people are going, the VCs will follow, and the companies definitely will become more interesting to look at.
Thank you. We are actually running out of time. It's been an interesting discussion, but we have a lot of questions left. So I think it's closing remarks. I would like to give James the floor. So he has some announcements to make as well.
Okay, thank you everyone for the opportunity to give the closing remarks. We run Kazakhstan Digital Accelerator, and as I mentioned repeatedly, we have been able to attract some of the best founders to come through the program. And if you, as investors, are supporting companies that you think can need a little bit of help, a little bit of mentorship, a little bit of assistance from entrepreneur in residence and the likes of them, we are here to accelerate the companies further. We work with everyone, AIFC including, but of course also with venture capital firms and angel investors. And we look forward to seeing you. And this is an invite to you. Look forward to seeing you at the Quest Ventures Day. That's happening this week as part of the overall series of events that AIFC is running. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you, speakers. Thank you, guests. I hope you enjoyed it.